HR Transformation in Depth is sponsored by Workday. Welcome to HR Transformation in Depth, the latest in a series of programs that bring government and industry together to explore the transformative impact of technology on government services. I'm George Jackson with FedGov Today. Data across the federal human resources landscape has been fragmented for decades, maintained in silos owned and operated by individual agencies. But there's a new push to leverage modern technology and unify that data in order to align HR with broader federal transformation initiatives. We'll go in depth for the goals on that effort, like better employee experience, more accurate data, and reduced costs. You'll also learn more about how the success of that effort hinges on two words: change management. Katharine Kelley is Deputy Chief of Space Operations for Personnel at the U.S. Space Force, and Cliff Purkey is Vice President of Product at Workday Government. Kate, great to have you back. Cliff, welcome. Our first go-round here. Let's kick off broad. Talk to me about the connection between those two really big things: HR, human resources, and larger mission objectives for a sophisticated organization like U.S. Space Force. How have they historically been connected? How will they be connected in the future, ma'am? Welcome.
Thanks for having me back. It's great to see you again, George. I was really excited about the conversation today because I think too often we forget about how important it is to link the personnel effect and ability to the mission. You know, in the Space Force, our primary goal is to secure our nation's interests in, from, and to space. And what that really demands of us is space superiority. The amount of technical credential and the amount of knowledge that is necessary to have that as your mission and your goal is unbelievably significant. And we're trying to do this within a space industry that is continuing to grow for all the other purposes that are absolutely just as valued. You know, in our case, what we really need to do is to make sure that we have the ability to defend and protect our assets in space, which really means we're defending and protecting both industry and other government entities that have national interest and our allies to be able to achieve their purposes as well. So the stakes are high. And the clash of talent necessary to build that type of a workforce capable of delivering on that type of a mandate is unbelievably challenging in this type of environment, which is why the intersection of the talent we're looking for and the ability to manage that in an agile way becomes so critical to our success. I think the reality is this: there's so many companies, academia, research, and government looking for the same type of technical talent today. And so we really have to be smart about not only the value proposition that we bring, but also deliver on the mission that our nation is demanding of the Space Force. And that in and of itself is just alone the reason to really examine today's topic. Making data integrate and actually work for the workforce, as opposed to data helping just the technical side of business, is fundamentally a different shift. And that's absolutely the power of what I think we're talking about today.
Let's step back, Cliff, for a moment from space specifically. You know, unique challenges, as Kate so eloquently pointed out, but those two words that I really leaned into at the top of the program: change management. What are some common challenges that you see across this industry as organizations lean into the title of this program, HR Transformation? What challenges are they up against, sir?
Yeah, thanks, George. Thanks for hosting, Kate. It's really nice to meet you, and thanks to everyone who lives their lives in service to our nation. You know, when you think about change management, it's really being used a lot today, and in my experience, in my mind, it comes down to communication. I think as you embark upon any sort of change at this scale, communication becomes critical. I think a very key way to get after that is a strategic partnership between the customer and the solution. And that way a wall doesn't get formed. And by strategic partnership, I certainly mean at the leadership levels, but all the way down to the practitioner, so that the information is flowing across, so that both have clarity on what's trying to be achieved and what the solution can bring. There's very little that can't be configured in Workday. We just need to understand the requirement.
Talk about some of those achievements that you're reaching for, Kate. A few that I wrote down: employee experience, cost savings, certainly. Audit readiness is a huge focus, not just for Space Force, but for the entire department. Like, at the outset, what are some of those mission objectives that you're after?
So, George, this may sound a little pejorative, but I absolutely mean it. There's almost nowhere to go but up, right? And obviously, I kind of use that with a little bit of laughter, given our mission of space. But the reality is, I today rely upon systems that I don't control. And I rely upon hundreds of systems that I don't control. And so the user experience for HR practitioners is certainly a value proposition to be able to bring forward in some of these more innovative ways that we're trying to shape and transform how we do HR. But the other reality is that we have to be able to understand the data sets that are underpinning decision making. And that's a lot of what is critical about why the HR intersection with data is so important. Because almost every talent decision you make can be made based on gut instinct and a resume, and it's almost always not the right or total picture if you solely rely upon that. And so our ability to try to break through some of the systemic system silos that we have in place today becomes an unbelievable challenge, but also an unbelievable opportunity of what we're trying to achieve. Let's not even undersell the importance of a cost-effective HR platform that integrates data collectively, which then allows you to rely upon a data set that is actually akin to what you're trying to do, instead of homegrown, over time, individual application. And that's essentially what we're living with today and trying to get away from. The time management saved for employees, both user experience and the practitioner, in addition to the ability to actually make better informed decisions, has to be part of the value proposition. And that's certainly what I'm striving for our guardians, both military and civilian, in the Space Force.
Talk about the term COTS a bit, Cliff. I mean, commercial, off-the-shelf technology. Government traditionally or historically has not been like a huge adopter because those missions are so unique. How has technology changed over the past year, 2 years, 5 years to make that a different sort of reality today? What does COTS look like and potential for adoption across government?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think when you think about what's available in the commercial sector, it's very applicable to the federal sector. Traditionally, when a purchase was made, it became the government would own that system and had to maintain that system. And then what happens over time is customization, which makes that system very difficult to update. And then when, like Kate just said, when you talk about the hundreds of systems that are out there, and they're all operating now on different expectations and different code lines, and so your data is scrambled. What's different today is software as a service, where you get a system that's delivered out of the box to you without any bolt-ons. Your data is unified and it's all in one place, so that you no longer have to ask for data and wait on a spreadsheet, right? It's right there, right at your fingertips. And another key part of that is the innovation that occurs as part of the software as a service. So just as Workday does an update to a year, and then we do releases all throughout the year to make the system better, everybody benefits because everybody's on the same code line. We don't have to customize the update for every single user. They all get the same capability.
You laugh, Kate, with that example. Data in the past, like, how manual was that part of the process? If you, as the leader of this part of the U.S. Space Force, need information that's rooted in fact, rooted in data, how difficult historically has that been to pull, and what are you hoping to lean into or look forward to in the future relative to, I don't know, that word, visibility that people use all the time?
George, first, I would just offer that it's not a past issue, it's a today issue, right? I don't go a day in my job, even at the level I'm at, where I'm not soliciting for a piece of information that is likely housed in multiple different data sources, data sets, and applications to find it. So the reality is that much of the workforce as I know it in the federal government, most notably in the Department of War, because we're all challenged with the same issue right now, and services are working unbelievably hard to solve this with partners in the private sector, and making good strides, by the way. But in my particular case, it is a today fight to actually understand the level of intricacy needed to manage a talent base as complex as both a military and a civilian ecosystem. And so to get this access to data, there's a human intervention. Cliff is exactly right. There's a spreadsheet or two or three. And oh, by the way, you have to hope you find that one person that knows what the column on the spreadsheet actually means, not the title of the column, but what that really means in practice, which means the real knowledge base is somewhere between the individual who happens to know it from history, now juxtaposed into an Excel document. So the amount of complexity it takes to answer a simple question, like how many acquisition professionals do you have in the Space Force, should be a pretty simple question to ask. Until you parse out what do you mean by that, and are you talking about the job, and what about the certification, and how long have they been there, and do you mean if they're doing it today or they ever did it? So the extrapolation of all these potential data permutations becomes part of the challenge that we're trying to work through.
Cliff, I was watching you out of the corner of my eye. Something resonated in there for you. What was it?
Yeah, it's the data. It's trying to understand your workforce. And the systems that are out there today, the processes are built around managing the system instead of managing the workforce. And so when you think about the data that's required to make these decisions, and as Kate just talked about, the speed at which she's going to need to make those decisions, it's just not there. Yeah. The data has to be unified, it has to be clean, and it has to be accurate. And that is the only way to do true workforce planning.
If I could stay with you for a moment, sir, that data in a lot of cases is very sensitive. There's PII, personally identifiable information. What types of protections exist? How does all this fall under zero trust? Like, work in the cybersecurity aspect here. What's important?
It's very important, especially for the federal government. The information that the federal government maintains is key to our national security. On the corporate side, it's key to intellectual property. So the systems have to be secure. When you think about the way the design is now, you have systems that are secure, but they're independently secure. And for them to work together just doesn't happen. With Workday, it's all included, including a very foundational base in AI. So when you want to know about your acquisition professionals, the AI can dig into the data and not only tell you how many you have, how many certified, but then also look at the performance data and analyze that and say, here are the ones that are really good at it. That's available straight out of the box.
Kate, Cliff, don't go anywhere. The fun stuff is coming up next. Imagine a world where all those silos are busted and data flows seamlessly across government. What would organizations be able to do that they weren't able to do before? After the break, a look at workforce planning, skills inventory management, and more. HR Transformation in Depth continues in a moment.
Oh, so you corporate types are rock stars?
Well, that's as ridiculous as rock stars being corporate types.
Workday's AI agents are making you all rock stars.
Sorry, habit. Proceed.
So that's a slide. Any questions?
And now with Workday, we can manage our people and AI agents. I'm sorry. Who are they?
Oh, interns.
We're interns.
Good night!
I'll see you tomorrow.
Welcome back to HR Transformation in Depth. At the top of the show, I referenced two words that could make or break HR transformation efforts at the federal level: change management. Let's dig back in with two of the top leaders in the field, Katharine Kelley, Deputy Chief of Space Operations for Personnel at U.S. Space Force, and Cliff Purkey, Vice President of Product at Workday Government. So, Kate, change management, one thing that leaders are running into is technological barriers, these technology-oriented challenges they have to address in order to bust those silos that you were talking about earlier. What are some of those? What are the services up against, ma'am?
It's a great question, and one that we wrestle with daily. So there's a complexity of the amount and volume of data that we have to manage inside the Department of War, and certainly the Space Force is no different. Quite frankly, the size and scale of our service comparatively is pretty small when you juxtapose it against the size of, say, an Army, an Air Force, a Navy. But the reality is we have to manage and track the amount of information the same way for every single Guardian. And because we're reliant upon so many of these existing systems, they're all in disparate places, and the API interfaces are mostly the challenge in terms of exchange of data. So the reality is also that you have different authorities and different chains of authority who control where this data is housed, and you've got to work your way through those data exchange agreements in order to actually get to a point where there's a federated concept and you're pulling together some of this content. That's probably what I see as the near-term, really difficult technology barrier right off the bat. But there's more nuance to this. You're also trying to get through the mental barrier of the practitioners who know how they've done their core business for years and might be not sure of what this means for a new way of doing the HR work. That they have been trained and done fantastic jobs performing in arguably very difficult circumstances where their jobs are just as challenging as those of us who are trying to make sense of what the process or the policy or the data tells us. And so making sure that those HR professionals who have to interact on a day-to-day basis for a certain outcome that is largely for the Guardian in this case, or in a commercial application for the employee. You want to make sure that those people are treated right, that they have the information that they need, that they have career opportunity and development. So the stakes are high. When you're talking about, the technology challenge, there's also the barrier of making sure the workforce and the user adoption challenge is one that you can overcome. And that's where I think the change management process is so critical. It's something that you have to work on every day. It is not something that in my personal experience you can just talk about, have a couple of all hands type discussions and then believe that the entirety of the ecosystem is on board. You have to constantly come back, beat that drum, and make sure that, to Cliff's earlier point about communication, you are flattening as much of that as possible and keeping the workforce with you as you go through the change. That, to me, has the greatest chance of success in something that is as challenging as doing large-scale organizational change.
Kate anticipated in a big way, Cliff, where I was hoping to go next, and I'm going to boil that down, paraphrasing obviously a little bit here, but administrative burden is a big part of what she was talking about. Automation has advanced at a rapid clip and continues to do so. How is that going to impact this space, or how is it impacting it already?
Yeah, it's so true. Automation, the speed at which things happen now is a lot faster than it used to be. I used to have to walk down to the end of the driveway to get the news, right? It's at my fingertips now, and that's the same thing for everything we're facing. I would say that when you think about automation, it really boils down to simplification of process. Like Kate was just saying, keeping everybody engaged to get that process to where it needs to be. And then that automation will result in some key things. Number one, it'll make the HR practitioner's job in this case much simpler. It could make the finance person much simpler because of the finance capabilities that we bring to bear. But more than that, it helps the user. They get into the system, they have their issue, they say this is what they need, and then they get out of the system. And it's very transparent, and that returns speed to mission. They don't sit around and worry about an HR thing like they might traditionally do, wondering if somebody was going to fix their problem.
Ma'am?
I would also be remiss if I didn't make this point, and I think Cliff is spot on, that automation ability to accelerate the delivery of what that human capital professional or the actual employee, the benefit of the process, it cannot be understated, nor can the art and the science behind all of talent management,
Yes.
right? And so I think there's also an important point to remember here, that there is still, in my personal opinion, a level of human interaction that you want in your HR ecosystem. I'm not yet convinced that the best tailored commercial or otherwise solution supplants the human touch and the art behind talent management. And I think the nirvana state that at least I'm striving for is the right balance between those two.
You're a woman after my own heart, Kate. I mean, sometimes in the grocery store, I seek out the line that you have to wait in as opposed to the automated version. Both work on certain occasions, but sometimes I do enjoy kind of the romance of talking with that person on the other end of that relationship, you know? So let me get back to HR here, though. I'm wandering on a tangent. Benefits, compensation, learning, absence management. What do you envision in sort of the future? Wave your magic wand, like what does that look like if this HR transformation that you're undertaking goes the right way?
I actually have a goal that really allows the service to be an exemplar for the rest of the Department of War. And there's a couple of reasons for that. Uniquely, the Space Force has some legislative authorities that other services don't have. We've been able to, with the support of Congress, have some authorities that allow us to have full and part-time work opportunities for our military, but we can do that within the single component structure that we have today, which is legislatively and legally fundamentally different than the other services. The other thing that we have, to the point of agility, is an unbelievably powerful civilian workforce that heavily works with and augments our military guardians. And so the end state that I envision is an HR ecosystem that supports both enterprises and allows military service in a way that doesn't make life harder on military guardians who may want to serve in a part-time capacity and then a full-time capacity. You know, the reality is we're all competing for talent. And data shows us historically on the military side that we lose a lot of people at that mid-career point because in many cases they're dual income. In today's world, we know that many people are supporting elderly parents or younger children or grandchildren even.
Yeah.
And so setting people up for those tough choices of stay in the military, but you have to stay on our terms, or maybe give a choice of having a part-time opportunity and not losing you with your talent and the expertise that we've trained you for, is a choice that I want guardians to be able to make. But what I envision is an HR ecosystem that supports all of that. And right now, today, we don't have it. So that's the strides that I'm trying to work towards in order to not only understand who we are as a military force, both military and civilian, but have an ecosystem that allows that more agile talent management and data awareness about my talent management to make the best decisions I can for the service.
I hear that time and time again, Cliff, and I introduced, as I teased this second segment, that phrase, skills inventory management. Tell me what that means and maybe what's state of the art out there in the HR landscape. Like who's doing skills inventory management in a really future-focused way?
Yeah, so when you think about skills-based management and workforce planning and workforce management, and Kate hit on something that I want to dovetail off of, it really comes down to the data. You've got to have the data, and it needs to be available to you when you need it, instead of asking for it and waiting a couple of days for it all to come together. Because of the speed at which talent is moving around, Workday does really good at this. Workday has built-in capabilities to do succession planning, but it also has the ability for the HR practitioner to take a look and see there is a population of our workforce that's at risk. there are more people leaving in this skill set than is normal. And alert the user so that they can put thought into that and make recommendations to Kate about things they can do to retain that talent and go shopping because they're going to need to replace it. When you think about all that, skills-based management is the way we're going to have to go. When I came up, it was education. You went and got a formal education, or you joined the military, which is what I did, and then you got your education through that. Now it's going to be about skills and certifications and having an inventory, like I said a moment ago, of how all that is going, so that when it comes time to, when a need surfaces in the Space Force for a certain skill, let's say a China-speaking officer with cultural awareness, somebody that's lived in China, that is a button click away. That data is there. When I entered Workday a few months back, it was very astounding to me that every piece of data that I had provided to the company as part of my application process was now resident on my profile, and they had an inventory of my skills. So Anil, our CEO, if he needs anything that I have in my unique background, it's a button click away and he can say, I need Cliff to do this for me.
Jump in there, ma'am.
The other piece of this that I think is so important, and Cliff is exactly right. You want to be able to find that unique skill that you need, but you also want to be ahead of when you need it. And that's what's so important about really understanding and being able to see that skill and that ability in your workforce. In many cases, I don't think I'm alone in this at all. You have people doing certain functions and they're well capable of doing 5 more, but you only tracked them based on the job you hired them to do. And the reality of trying to be in front of your gaps is that you have to be able to understand your multifunctional players. And so the ability to move faster than the gap already created, meaning you move faster than the known loss, is one of the things that we've got to be able to get to in talent management. And I would posit that that's probably true across the board for any entity. Sure. But the speed of which we're trying to operate, especially grow the service, in my case, and to be able to remain as competitive as we need to with our adversaries, demands the fact that we have got to understand more than just what we hired you to do. We've got to understand what you're capable of. We've got to understand what else you can do. And that means you got to be in front of the problem.
In the 20 seconds we have left, Cliff, what is the one thing, if I want to create buy-in amongst my workforce, what should I be doing to lead HR transformation?
I think being clear up front about what the expectation is, what the goal is, inviting everybody to participate in that process, building that partnership, and then showing results. There has to be results. And when you start to show those results, you'll get the buy-in you need, the continued buy-in and adoption for the process.
Kate Kelley, U.S. Space Force, Cliff Purkey, Workday Government, thank you so much, and thank you for watching HR Transformation in Depth. If you like this series and want a deep dive on other topics critical to the business of government, head to our website, fedgovtoday.com, or the FedGov Today YouTube channel. We've covered audit readiness, cloud security, health IT, and a whole lot more. For FedGov Today, I'm George Jackson. Thanks for watching. Good night.